a new phishing method without links.
So Manny, another phishing story here. This one's interesting in that maybe the traditional techniques we tell folks to look up for phishing campaigns maybe doesn't apply.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, Mike. I think that's the thing that really caught my eye with this one. We've, done many stories about phishing campaigns, and we, can't probably do enough to, try to tell folks about the dangers of phishing campaigns and everything that comes along with it. But this one has an interesting twist to it. So this story comes to us from Sophos, and the story is written about these two phishing campaigns that they were looking at, and one of them was actually sent into them, probably by one of their readers, and one of them they actually got themselves. And so they took a look at these two phishing campaigns and tried to look at what was similar about them. And I think they made some determination that they were pretty confident that they came probably from two different bad actor groups. So it's interesting to find similarities in different actor groups and what they were using. So the story kind of goes through and it lays it out, and it's kind of nice if you read through this thing, how they lay the process out, and they kind of show you exactly the whole technique of a phishing campaign. So, typical stuff, on your step one, you get an email that basically contains some sort of, click-through link, right, which we see all the time. That click-through link is usually offering up something, right? It's either telling you about some sort of important notice about your bank account, or something that you really need to know about, right? I mean, that's what those campaigns are about. It's really to try to grab somebody's attention about something that they really need to do right now, and catch somebody at a moment of, not fully really engaged, and perhaps they'll click through something thinking, that it's really from whoever it says it's coming from. And then quickly moving on to step two, and basically providing this web page where you need to log in, right? So that's the next stage. You provide the link, they click the link, the person's taken to some place where they have to log in, right? And that's where the bad guys end up getting your credentials. So the bad guys now have done this many, many, many times, and this is typical. They usually clone, some original page. So if it's a banking page, they're going to clone what the banking page actually looks like. So they'll take things like, they'll basically steal the entire, HTML. They'll steal the images, the style sheets, right, from that page to make their page look as similar to the real page as they possibly can. Sometimes they host these pages either on brand new domains that they create. So temporarily they stand up a domain because they only need it for a short amount of time. Or they actually compromise an existing domain, and then they stuff this page somewhere deep where it may not get noticed for quite some time by the admin. And as I said before, they usually provide some sort of clickable link within that email that they're sending to you. So basically, in the next step here, we're obviously still here in step three, where the information is actually being sent back to the bad actors here, but we also look at a button, right? So in these forms, we usually have, enter your username and password, and then we've got the submit button. And this submit button is usually, again, from an HTML perspective, it's this input tag with a type equals submit as an attribute, right? And an interesting thing that they brought up in this article, which is something I really hadn't thought about before, and perhaps maybe somebody can look at this and perhaps change this. But we always talk about, when you get an email and you're not exactly sure when it's got a link in it, and I go to hover over that link to make sure that I understand where it's actually going and where it's taking me to, it would be interesting. But as far as I know, and as far as the person who wrote this story knows, there isn't a way, and there isn't a browser that does this today, but being able to go and hover over the actual submit button to figure out where the form is actually submitting your credentials. Because it would be interesting because, as we'll see in a second here, there's a way to sort of hide the fact that your submission here, right, the username and your credentials, your username and password, are actually not being sent to who you think they're being sent to. So unfortunately, in this case, hovering over the submit button isn't going to work, right? So it's not going to tell you that, in fact, when you look at the code on the back end, that your credentials are actually not going to the bank or whatever you think you're going to. That's one of the interesting things. The second interesting thing here about this story also is that when they looked at this, so when Sophos looked at these two examples, the one example, when they delivered the email, instead of having a clickable link inside of the email itself, they actually had an attachment, and the attachment was an HTML attachment. So it's a file, right? It's basically just a file with a .html or HTML extension on it, right? And so most of us think about like what that actually means, and maybe most people don't understand what that actually means, right? But it's a big difference between I'm getting a link that I click on and I'm going to be taken somewhere, as opposed to I've got an attachment, and that attachment is going to do something, right? And so most of us think of, I get an attachment on an email, and when I click this, it's going to try to open something on my box. In this case, I look at it HTML, it should open up in the browser sandbox, so it should be fairly safe, right? Unfortunately, we are accustomed to looking at a link, right, today, and whether the link is what it says it is, and I look at that link and I go, hey, does that actually say, bankofamerica.com, right? Or does it say something that looks like Bank of America that actually isn't, right? And I can do that hovering, and I can look to see whether or not it's actually going to take me to where I think it's going to take me, right? But unfortunately, with this attachment, you don't get that, right? So I can't click, I can't hover over anything, right? And when you go ahead and open that attachment, right? So I look at it and I go, well, it's going to open up, it's going to open up on my machine, it's going to open up in a browser, but it's going to be local, right? The browser, when it opens this thing up, it's going to show you, when you look at it in the address bar, and you can see it in the story, the browsers kind of handle it differently, right? And so when the browser opens it up, you'll actually see something like file : / right? As opposed to seeing, HTTP or HTTPS, right, that we normally would see. And unfortunately, with file : / with an HTML document, you don't get sort of the same things that you would get when you open up a web page. Things like, looking at the certificate. Is the certificate okay? The browser giving you sort of the green thumbs up or the red, like, hey, the certificate looks off on this thing. You don't get that with an actual file that's actually being delivered to the browser as an actual file, and the browser's trying to open it up. So unfortunately, that's something that we now see here that's kind of a problem, right? And, it could easily fool people into opening things up and kind of not realizing that, in fact, when this thing opens up in the browser window, it'll actually look like that form. So if you're expecting to be at bankofamerica.com, you're going to get a screen that looks like Bank of America's login page, right? But it's actually a file that's actually being hosted locally on your machine that's just being opened up by your browser. Here's the thing. When you enter your credentials into that box, they're going to be sent over to the bad actor, right? Just because it's just a file and you think it's just a file and it's not actually doing anything because it's a local file, you're wrong. You enter your credentials in there, there is HTML code behind there that's basically going to send that information off to the bad guys. Now, what can you do in this situation? Well, there's a couple things, and they're not as easy, but I think this is not an easy problem. So a lot of the browsers have built-in developer tools. And so you can, in fact, use some of these developer tools to actually look for this action attribute that I just talked about. So, again, I won't get into it here, but if you most browsers have this developer's tools that you could actually go into, if you wanted to, hopefully folks are just not fooled and just won't open it. But if you wanted to go look and just to make sure you understood where the form was actually sending the information in that form to, you could actually use these developer tools, look for the action attribute, and that action attribute should bring you to where that form is and where that form may be actually sending your credentials out to. So you'll actually see the URL, the domain, or wherever it's actually trying to send those credentials out to. You may see it actually within the developer tools and stop yourself from doing something that you'll regret later on. So interesting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, you went through they started this tutorial, right? This phishing 101 that kind of walks you through sort of what that looks like. And I thought it was interesting. I've never seen it kind of laid out that kind of plain text before.
Yeah.
I also was kind of unaware, I'll be honest, about this whole, the hovering over submit, which I don't know if it's good or bad for me.
Right.
But yeah, that's something new that I learned in this story. And yeah, it's, I guess, is this the first time that we've seen a campaign that has this kind of web page attachment, at least that you've seen? Have we seen that technique used before?
I mean, I've seen emails with attachments that are HTML or HTML. I've seen that in the past. Now, I don't think I've ever seen it in the past associated to an actual phishing campaign, right? I mean, you and I in the business that we're in, right, in the security, we get people who may send us those files, right? But it's somebody sending you the file because they want you to look at their actual HTML code, right? Mm-hmm. So they're sending you that as an attachment. But I've never really thought about it in the sense of phishing, right? This could be a phishing tactic, that's being used. So that's the interesting twist here.
Right. And I think they have suggestions at the end, which are, kind of the typical ones, MFA, et cetera, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Instituting MFA, which, again, and they're kind of honest with their, it's like MFA works well, and it's better, obviously, than single factor. It's not perfect, but it's better than single factor, right? So, But yeah, there's a couple of different things that you could do to try to protect yourself against this. One of them obviously just being very suspicious now when you get, an attachment that has something that's HTML or HTML.